Welcome to the Creative Warriors Podcast, the heart and soul of photography. I'm Ariel, Faith, your host. Welcome back. We are welcoming Laura. She is joining us from Canada, and we're going to talk about mindfulness and slowing down. And with some of the challenges that she shared with last month, I would imagine this might be a particularly challenging subject.
It's not my strong suit, for sure.
And it may not even be necessary in reality, but we're going to talk about it anyway, because a lot of times photographers will say, you know, being present, and they're very helpful to be creative. So you may have another path of how you achieve it. So that'd be interesting to see how that works. So you ready?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think nothing highlights the difference in this more than me and my husband. Because we're both creative, but he's like kind of what you would imagine the creative person to be. He like does nothing, because if he does nothing and he doesn't think about things, it allows the creative juices to like stir inside of him. And I'm like, that is so strange. I'm like, let me research 100 top 10 creative tips, narrow them down to like, 5, and then we'll assign one to each week, and then we'll find an accountability partner so we can produce something. we approach inspiration very differently. I attack it, and he allows it to come in waves. Sure.
But your work looks so almost intuitive.
I think it sounds so cliche, but I think when I first started out, I did a lot of just looking at other artists, looking at Pinterest and stuff like that, and thinking, how did they do that? Like, how was that accomplished? Like, I remember I saw this image once of star trails across the night sky. And I was like, how is that a thing? How do you do that? And I went and I tried it. It was terrible. It was so terrible. I live way too close to the city. You can't do that with light pollution. And then this was obviously before kids, but I made my husband drive 2.5 hours into the mountains just so that I could try this creative technique. We brought a video on the laptop in the back of the car because it's a time lapse. So you need to have it out there for a few hours.
Yep.
And I learned how to do it, and it was amazing. And I did it like 3 or 4 times. And I was like, okay, I've mastered this now. That's great. Cool. What else? So I think I get intrigued. I get curious when I see other artists' work. And for me, it's always about the lighting too, right? Like, it's not just how did they edit that? Although I have pulled up, artists that I admire and put them on my, son's iPad, and then pulled up Lightroom and been like, I'm going to make this match that. And just like play back and forth until I can see how those tones are created. So there is that curiosity in editing as well. But for me, it's always been the light. Like, how are they working with the light? I remember when I first started being like, what is golden hour? How do you shoot in golden hour? Oh, if the sun is, off to the side rather than directly behind your subject, you can still get the rim light without all the harsh. So I would always like analyze and be curious about different things. And then as you do that, you kind of build up a repertoire. Like, I have no problem shooting in golden hour now. I don't need to like prepare and research. I could go, I'd have to find my intervalometer. I think my camera now is one built in, but I could go and I could do star trails if I wanted to drive 2.5 hours in the mountains. I don't. But you know what? I've never shot the Northern Lights. Never. I went to Iceland. I was so excited. I went in June. The sun never sets in June. I clearly did not plan that well at all. So went all the way to Iceland, never saw the Northern Lights, still on my bucket list. But I'm assuming it's just finding a place without a lot of ambient light and doing a slow shutter speed. But I'm going to try it one day. So it's just
I've never seen the Northern Lights, so I haven't seen them of it, but
there's been times where they have been visible where we are. But again, it's not it's like visible with all the city lights. Like, I told my son, I'm like, when you're older, we're driving to Alaska, okay? Just you and me. So like, yeah, it's just about being curious about all these different things that I see, and then kind of figuring out how to create them. And then as you do that, it builds in your repertoire, right? So I do a lot of creative flash. but I don't need to think about how to do it. Like I can do rim light, I can do gelled, I can do backlit rain, I can do, because as I've sort of learned them, they're like tools in your toolkit. And then you get like a toolkit full, and then you can kind of choose what you want to do. But sort of putting together my toolkit was like a really interesting exercise for me to like learn all of these things.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a strange question because I'm looking at some of the images that you provided for the covers of the episodes. And one of them is, they're so creative. And one of them is your 3 children, I believe it's you, sitting against the wall with their shadows, right? Almost has it reminded me of Peter Pan because of Peter Pan.
Oh, yeah.
But that's not, I mean, it's a self-portrait, but yet you see, I mean, it's just super creative. So I'm actually going to put that on the cover of this episode. Something like that. Do you kind of plan ahead of time what you're going to do? Or are you more intuitive? I mean, like,
it's really
spontaneous.
Usually for something like that, I plan about a day ahead or a day or 2 ahead, especially because my kids are very young in that. So I was like, all right, if we're going to do this, we need to do it here because nobody's napping. So I kind of like mentally planned that out. I think what happened was I had curled my hair and I was like, this is so nice. I should take a picture. My hair holds a curl for days. So I had a few days to sort of figure that out. But I was like, tomorrow, while it still looks good, I should do this. And then I thought a little bit. It took a little bit of figuring out because I knew like I was going to get it's a composite. I knew I was going to get the shadow image first. It's funny because in my off-camera flash advanced level course, I have the behind the scenes of that. And like one of my kids is full on lying on the floor, like having a tantrum. And one of them, because like to get a 1, 2, 3-year-old or however old they were to like stand in a line, that was probably the hardest part of the whole thing, was to just get them to stand in a line and not drop to the ground or run away. So
did you put the shadows together?
No, that's all one shot. The composite is all of them and then me.
Oh.
Because I was also only using one light, and there's a light coming on me, but there's also a light directly behind them to get the shadows.
Right.
So without 2 lights, that wouldn't have worked. Also, it was a very, very small space, and where my children are standing is actually where I needed to put the light for me.
Okay.
So I took a picture of them in a row to get their shadows, and then I sent them out of the room, and I just moved the light forward to where they were standing and tilted it towards me, and then I went and jumped in the photo to stitch them together. And it was just easier to do it as 2 shots like that. But yeah, I don't even remember if I hadn't. I probably saw something similar on Pinterest. I probably saw a shadow or something, and I was like, I feel like we could do that just, times 3. I didn't plan for the soother to be in the mouth. That was like a nice little addition. But yeah, I probably put on real clothes for the photo. Probably took the hoodie off. Like there's a little bit of planning, and I would have been like, oh, tomorrow I'm gonna do that. Yeah.
Oh, so do you find do you play? Is this an act of play for you? You know what I mean by that?
I mean, if my kids weren't melting down, it would have been kind of fun and interesting to figure out. It's like a puzzle for me. It's like doing Sudoku or however you pronounce it. It's like a brain activity for me. Can I figure out how this looks? And I love editing. So the editing part is always nice to just sort of sit down and see the finished product. But yeah, and I think because when I first learned photography, I was working 2 jobs. I was working, 8 to 4 with an hour and 15 minutes commute each way. I'd come home, I'd teach piano for a couple hours. And by then it was pitch black. It was after work. We lived in a tiny apartment with like hardly any windows. And I was like, well, I'm going to learn photography with no light. So I reached out to someone that I viewed as a mentor at the time. I mean, she still is. I just haven't talked to her in forever. And I was like, can you recommend a workshop? I took so many workshops when I first started learning. I took them until they started to overlap in knowledge. Because you get to the point eventually where like, you know enough that even though you're learning something, it's not necessarily worth the amount of money unless it's like a niche mini topic kind of thing. So probably spend a couple $1,000. I mean, it's your dollar, it's the conversion. It would have been much cheaper if it was Canadian. But I probably did like 7, 8, 9, just different workshops, mini courses and stuff to learn all the. And I said, what do you recommend? She's like, well, I'm helping teach off-camera flash. Why don't you enroll in that? I was like, great. So I signed up for it about 2 days before the course starts. And I'm like, off-camera flash. Do I need a flash? Like I was so new at photography. She's like, yeah, you need a flash. And I was like, oh no. So I'm like on Facebook Marketplace. I'm trying to, I don't even know if Facebook Marketplace was a thing back then. I was probably on Craigslist. I'm like, I gotta find a flash. Don't ask me how many flashes I had to find before I found one that was compatible with my camera. I didn't know that was a whole thing. I'm like, do not buy anything without me. I always tell my students that. I was like, I will help you. I will help you. Don't just go buy things.
Yes, they don't always work together. I've had that experience myself.
Right. So I'm like, okay, so manual, aperture, shutter speed, flash. So they kind of all came up together unintentionally. But because I had to learn without natural light, I had to learn creating my own light. And if I wasn't using flash, I was using lamps or night lights or oven lights. So very low light photography, which is difficult and really pushes your settings. I kind of threw myself in the deep end. And then when I came up, I'm like, wow, what do you mean that people just shoot in an overcast day? This is so nice. But because of that, I learned to look for light always because I never had it. I always had to create it or find it in weird places. So that kind of foundational habit stayed with me. So now whenever I look at photos, I'm like, what are they doing with the light? Where's the sun? Is there light coming from another location? Are they using a bounce board? Is there a secondary light? So my brain's just sort of trained that way. So whenever I see, photos that I want to emulate, I'm always like, what are they doing with the light? Because if you can figure that out, the editing you can do in whatever style. So I just started, looking at photographers I love, looking on Pinterest and being like, I took a Pinterest board of like 10 photos. And I'm like, I have no idea how they did this, but I'm going to figure it out. And I just kind of systematically worked my way through those kind of as my own little project. And that's a project that I give my students that project in one of my courses now. I'm like, go on Pinterest, find something you don't know how to do, figure it out, and then show me. And like, we can analyze together where we could have tweaked or whatever. So I think it's cool. It's like a puzzle. It's like a crossword puzzle.
Yeah, that's cool. It's so interesting that light is obviously we're capturing light on the back of the camera. That's what we're doing. But it's something that people either see or they don't see. I think once you see it, you can't unsee it, which is kind of nice. I've talked to a lot of different photographers, and it's almost like when you see the amount of incredible beauty in the world because of the light, the bouncing, the backlight, all those different things, the rim light and all those things. When you see all those things, you can just enjoy the day better because you're seeing them.
Oh yeah. Like I'll drive down the street and I'll be like, oh, those are cool shadows, like playing on the side of that building, right? I think it's something that you can train yourself to see, though.
Yes, absolutely.
It might be harder. Like some people might be more naturally inclined to it than others. So I'll give music as an example. People would sit down and they would play these beautiful, heartfelt pieces and score really high in the competition. I'd be like, where does that come from? Because I have such an analytical brain with autism that my teacher would be like, this note's going to be louder than this note. This note's going to be a little quieter. She would tell me every single note. And I'd be like, okay, I can do that. And they'd be like, wow, that's such feeling. But because my brain was so analytical, I think some people just see it and feel it so much easier. And then some people like me are like, all right, let's study this. Let's break it down into steps. But like, it's definitely a skill, no matter where you're coming from or how you learn it, that you can enhance and get better at. So I had so many people be like, why can't I shoot like this photographer? And I'm like, well, first off, stop shooting at noon. And they're like, well, that's when my clients are available. I'm like, did you ask them when they're available or did you tell them when you're available? Oh, great. You'd like to book a family session. Would you like sunrise or sunset? This is what times those are on those days. If that's too early for you, we could do it on this month when it changed, like the time changes. And ever since I've only had maybe one or two families be like, can we do it at like noon? I'm like, can you at least give me 10 or 11? Like, I don't think I've done like a noon photo shoot since I learned the importance of light. And then I'm like, all right, we can. However, these are the locations we're doing it at. Right. There has like lots of open shade. So like, I think once you learn the importance of light and you start communicating that to your client, you don't need to explain it to them. I'm just like, the light will look better at these times. Do you want this time or this time? Very rarely will they push back. They're like, oh, well, you're the professional. So if you learn your art and you just communicate that with confidence, then you can start start creating pieces that, you know, were in your initial vision rather than, oh, everyone always wants them at noon. This is what I've got.
Do you ever struggle with, or have you ever struggled with, you know, doubt and any of those things that a lot of photographers, or is that something that your mind just kind of doesn't even bother with? That sounds like a funny question, but.
No, I think I take things a lot less personal than other photographers because I have no problem being like, you're entitled to your opinion. It's a free country. You can be wrong.
I'm wrong every day. I don't know what to deal with.
No, I think when I first started, I had like certain photographers that I held in high esteem, and I would always like pull up their work and I'd be like, why doesn't it look like that? Why doesn't it look like that? But I think as the years went on, my work did start to look like that. Like the more I strived, the more I tried again, the more I would, you know, take my photo and their photo and be like, hey, husband, what makes these look different? Because I mean, he does color grading and stuff too. You'd be like, oh, well, the greens are warmer or whatever. Like I finally kind of got to the place that I emulated the artists that I admired. And then they ended up going in different directions as their art developed. And I didn't follow. Like I was worried that I was always going to, and this is like as recent as like 2 years ago that I was like, do I look enough like this person yet? But then as their art changed, I was like, oh, no, that's not for me. And then I realized that like, it's not that I'm copying them and I need to be them. I just wanted what they had at that time. And now they've changed their style. And I have no interest in following that because I like how my stuff looks. And I would even say to my friend, they're like, oh no, you have your own look. I'm like, are you sure I don't look exactly like that person? They're like, no, like you definitely have your own look. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll take your word for it. But yeah, it took I was always constantly trying to match my tones and my vibe and my look to like other people that I admired. But then it got to the point where I was happy with it and I was happy to let them move on too. And I mean, I never like, there's a lot of people that like are buying the same furniture as other people. And I'm like, no, come on, guys. Like it's a little extreme. But like, I knew that I loved the tones. I knew that I loved the lifestyle look. So I liked different colors than they did. So I always found ways to make it my own. I wouldn't like exactly copy, but like I would find aspects that I would like, you know, strive for. And then at first it was so hard to match it. I'd be like, why do their greens always look different than my greens? It bothers me so much. But then eventually I started getting consistent and even deviating a little bit and being like, you know, now that I know how to get that exact, maybe I do kind of like it a little bit like this. But honestly, that was probably like 8 years of like wishing I was something that I wasn't.
Okay.
And striving for it, not being like, I'm a rubbish photographer because I don't look like them, but just like constantly striving for the aspects of the photography they had that I loved.
It's interesting in the world of, you know, old classical artists that would paint, right? They would paint the work of a master.
Yeah.
You know, they would take whoever the master was and they would copy it.
Yeah.
To learn light, shadow, and all those other things. So they would just do that over and over and over again until they could literally mimic the brushstrokes of that master. Mm-hmm. But then they would, in that process of mastering different people, they would then create their own, what they really liked, what they were drawn to. And then of course you got the deviants that went off and did their impressionistics. I mean, they were the ones who just said, the heck with it. I want to do it this way, not that way, which is where variety comes in. So that process of imitating is a very valuable part of learning, right? Yeah. Sometimes we feel like we're cheating. I don't know whether you did or not, but sometimes you feel like it's not mine because I'm cheating, I'm copying.
People think they need to be one of the deviants. Like everyone needs to be like completely unique and their own, but there's how many billion people? There's not billions of styles of photography. Like there's only so many shades of green, you guys. You're going to copy someone. And I think like just giving yourself permission. I mean, I joked for years. I was like, I want to be Meg Lukes when I grow up. That's what I said for years. I loved, like she had 3 little boys. I had 3 little boys. She shot lifestyle and she had her daughter. And now she does she does multiple light setups, 3, 4 light setups, portrait stuff. I'm like, that's not for me. Like, I want to be Meg Luke's 6 years ago. And that's where I stayed. She moved on to like portrait stuff. Her tones have changed a little bit, but I stayed kind of where I saw her at 6 years ago. But like, it's different because I stayed more lifestyle. I'm a single light shooter for the most part. I don't like bringing in more than one light. I don't have time for that. So like, we kind of like, I didn't keep following her in her, where she developed as an artist, but I loved what I saw that she had early on. And I straight up tried to copy it. Now, I didn't go buy the same mirror and hang it on the wall as her or whatever. I may have painted one room green just because she had a green room and I didn't love it. I was like, I can just change it in Photoshop. I have gray walls and I have blue walls. I don't want to live with emerald walls. I want gray walls and blue walls because I'm not going to change the environment I live in to take a pretty photo. But do you know how easy it is to change blue to turquoise in Lightroom? It's pretty easy.
And gray to all kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, there's a way to still be me. And like, I have incorporated, we kind of talked about this, like my boys' neurodiversity, like the clothing, the beautiful clothing that I see these photographers put their kids in. I cannot have a button on the front of my son, even if it's not through to the back of the shirt. If it's a decorative button, it's a hard no. It's a hard no. My kids live in cotton graphic tees. I have them turn them backwards when I take photos of them because I sell stock photography and I don't want the logos. They know now that I will give them a candy if they turn their shirt backwards. It's just understood. And they accept payment in the form of Skittles. And I do pay my kids. It's their time. I'm asking them to take time away from what they're enjoying and loving to serve my vision and my artistry. Like, why? It's not bribing them. It's paying them fairly for their time. And fairly is, they're a cheap hire, let me tell you. Paid them. I got paid from Mix Styles to do a shoot, and I paid them 25 cents an image that they were in. They thought that was great. They get $1 a week for their allowance.
Hey, but that's cool.
I am compensating them. They're working with me, but like, they'll never wear suspenders. They did for a brief period of time. So realizing that that's going to be what my photos are. They're going to be wearing boring clothes and they're going to have iPads in the photos. I'll try to hide the Apple logo so I can still sell it for stock, but they're going to have technology. I'm not going to have that farmhouse look because I don't live on a farm and my kids won't wear anything that is different because they have sensory issues. So just being like, I can still edit with those tones. I can still, use presets as a base or whatever, but like, it's going to be different because my life is different, whether I like it or not. And this is who we are. And this is my art.
And part of art is expressing your experience, right? And your experience is the sensory issues, and acknowledging them and honoring your children by not forcing them to wear things that make them uncomfortable.
Exactly. And I think people get like an image that people are like, do you plan your photos? I'm like, I do, but the final photo is never what I originally thought it would be. Like, I love all of my boys sitting in a row on a bench doing something on our wood table. I love that. It's getting to the point where the sensory issues are enough that brushing shoulders is a huge trigger for one of my kids. So while I still sometimes can get them on the bench for like a second, I have a lot of photos with one sitting across the table from the other. And none of these lovely photographer works are the kids across the table from each other because it's a lighting nightmare. But it is for us. I have to shoot a little wider, a little higher to bring my light in from the side or not have all three of my kids. But then that would be a problem because they all want the Skittle. They all want to be, so like there's times where it's like, no, this isn't how I really wanted the image to go, but it's good enough. You know what I mean? Like it is what it is. I'm just operating within those limitations.
It sounds interesting. I have one daughter who when she was young, she had a lot of sensory issues. So I understand that. She was never diagnosed in the world of diagnosis. Her doctor didn't want to put her in the system in the United States. The system, once you're labeled, it can interfere with your adult life. So she didn't want to, she was functional enough that she didn't want to label her.
That makes sense.
So I just had to learn what I needed to do as a mom because she was very different than my other children.
Yeah.
Different father. So therefore, different child. And oh my goodness gracious, some of the things were just, from my perspective, were crazy, but you had to learn to respect it. Yeah. Right. And the sensory issues were one of those things. I mean, she wouldn't wear pants or socks. I mean, it was just, level 10 over what I'm considering, it's just a sock, but then I learned, I got smart, and then I realized that I needed to live in her world, not the other way around.
Yeah. And I have similar sensory issues to a lot of my kids, which helps, but also it's been interesting learning to live the world through their eyes because it's given me more permission to be myself. Because I think I spent a lot of time trying to change who I am. Like, this is a flaw. This is an issue. How do I change my mindset and overcome this? And it's like, no, this is how I'm genetically wired. And this is where I need to suck it up and work in the adult world. And then here's where I can give myself accommodation for that. So it's been great learning to give myself that grace as well.
Yeah, I bet. Were you, just out of curiosity, were you diagnosed as a child or as an adult?
No, my mom pulled me out of the school system when I was 10 because it wasn't going well. I've since let her know, hey, Mom, I'm the problem. It's me. At the time, we didn't know, right? But I had my OCD diagnosis first. I was triggered. A lot of my symptoms were triggered with postpartum. A lot of depression and anxiety, which turned out to just be undiagnosed ADHD. But through that, I got an OCD diagnosis. It does nothing for you as an adult. There's a lot. Well, actually, that's not true. I just finished my post-secondary degree and I got a nice discount for having ADHD on that. So there are some accommodations if you're still doing school. There is a ton of accommodations for autism and a ton of funding opportunities for autism in the province that I live in. So if you can get them, not as an adult, but if you can get them as a child, there's so many resources that you can get for that. But yeah, so I had my OCD diagnosis. And then while we were pursuing, we always joked about my oldest. So he's 3% autistic. He's 93% autistic, actually. We always joked about that. And then his preschool teachers were like, you should strongly pursue this. So I was like, all right. And then my husband said, I don't know what he has, but whatever he has, you have. So because we were the same person, I was like, don't touch him. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, don't hug him. And also don't hug me. That's weird. No physical contact. That would be great. So we would just, position ourselves on the far side of the table. If anyone came in the room, sent to walk around the table to give us a hug. But as we learned about that, and he got his diagnosis and we started therapy. And then I was like, I don't know what's going on with my next kid. He had a lot more diagnoses, which came out in his psych ed, which we got when he was closer to 7. So fairly recently. And he got his autism diagnosis. And I was like, wait a minute, if they, then I. So I went to my doctor and she gave me a preliminary sheet to fill out. And I filled it all in. And my husband's like, that's not entirely accurate. I'm like, I think it's pretty accurate. He's like, you're saying you can do these things, but I don't feel like you can do these things. I'm like, well, it's too late. I already handed it in to her. I scored off the charts, even with my inaccurate answers. I was in the highest category, even though I had given myself so much grace. So I never paid the $2,700 or whatever it is to get it on paper, but my doctor and I know. And then as we were getting my kids, I'm like, he for sure has ADHD. You don't stare at your shadow for 45 minutes when you went up to change into your swimming trunks because you got distracted. It's not a thing. Please stop looking at your shadow on the wall and come downstairs. Yep, you got it. And yet you're still right coming downstairs. So I was like, we need to get ADHD diagnoses for them because the medication can help and it's been life-changing. And then again, it was kind of like, wait a minute, if they are, then am I? And then, yes, I got diagnosed with that as well. So it was a lot of just sort of advocating for them and realizing, wait a second, if it counts for them, then it probably counts for me, and becoming aware of that. And then just realizing I'm not like a highly anxious person that needs to learn to like people better. I just need 4 hours of downtime after I hang out with you for an hour. Like, that's just how my brain is wired. It's not something that through counseling I need to like get better at being social or whatever. It's like, no, it's just, that's how long my batteries take to recharge. So it is what it is.
That's the life of an introvert, whether, no matter what, wherever you fit, that's still the life of an introvert, because people drain you rather than.
I love hanging out with people. It's so enjoyable, but like, then I just need you all to go away.
Yeah, you need that recharge, just like the phone does. You use it a lot. You got to plug it back in.
I like always trying to be like, oh, I need to like dress better, or I need to like, I can't just wear the same shirt because I bought 3 versions of it in different colors, and then I still just wear the black one all the time. I was like, I need to be more creative, and it's like, no, I'm gonna wear this black shirt. Don't worry, it's clean. I own 3 of them, but this is just what I wear because I don't like change. Like, just realizing like that this is just who I am, and stop trying to fight against it. Stop trying to be like, oh, I should want to cuddle my kids. I don't really want to. Thankfully, 2 of them also don't really want to. And the 3rd one, we used up our limited battery strength for cuddles on. I just realizing that doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. It doesn't mean that I'm a bad mom. I can't watch a movie with them. I cannot. You put 3 of us in a tiny room with a loud movie and popcorn and snacks and a sensory swing and a crash pad and like dibs on the couch where no one's touching me. And I was like, it's just not my thing. So daddy watches movies with them and I clean up after dinner. And that doesn't make me a bad mom, but I thought it did for so long. What's wrong with you? Why do you not want to be with your children? Why do you just want to clean the house all the time? And I'm like, no, I will swim with my children. I will play outside with my children. I will not be in a small room with my children because I have sensory needs too. So just realizing like, this is who I am. How can I make sure that I'm meeting these needs of my family, but also not trying to change who I am, and communicating that. Communicating that has been huge in our marriage. Like, for my husband to straight up be like, and I'm like, is this a muggle thing? He's like, I think it's an autism thing. I'm like, I will concede your point. I don't understand it, but I will concede your point. Like, just being able to have those conversations.
Is he your half or is he your full?
My half or my full? Oh, he's my If he ever listens to this episode, he won't. I strongly suspect that a little bit of ADHD medicine wouldn't hurt him. He's definitely not on the spectrum, but like, I would say that it wasn't solely me that contributed genetically to our children.
Well, that is definitely true, no matter what he says.
Yeah, no, but he's definitely not on the spectrum. But I would, there's
other things, right?
Yeah, like
we all have something.
Yeah, it's a little bit something. Yeah. Yeah.
So, what do you think? Talk more about, you talked a little bit about this last time, but talk a little bit more about with your current, with your challenges and when your brain going in all different directions, when you have a specific task like a wedding or a family shoot, how do you stay focused during that shoot when there are things you can't control around you?
Right. I mean, this is probably a controversial answer, but like medication helps a lot. Finding the right medication, because there is very much the wrong medication, but finding the right medication really helps me focus. It really calms my brain down. But that being said, like knowing when I need it and when I don't, probably should have taken it for this podcast interview, which is why I'm on so many tangents. But I was like, I'm just working from home all day. It's okay. I mean, our side of it does keep me up. It does keep me up for a long time, and I'm getting over a cold a little bit. So I'm like, I probably need sleep more than I need focus. So it's a conscious choice not to take it this week. But I do know, like, when I'm working in those high tense environments, that like, yeah, I'm gonna take it that day, which helps me focus. But also, it's getting to the point too where like you do something enough that it becomes comfortable, right? I don't need it to shoot a wedding because weddings are so structured. I need to be able to creatively problem solve on the fly if a groomsman falls into a pond because he thought planking would be a good, opportunity to pass the time while we shot the bridesmaids. So it was just an interesting wedding. Like there are there are those situations, but like also just realizing too, I think I'm bad at it in my home life because I take everything so personally. But in my work life, I'm really good at knowing what is within my control and what is not. I could not have stopped him from planking. That was a him choice. Now he's wet. The photos will be shot from the waist up. Thankfully, it wasn't a deep pond.
Or he will just be sharing his pond experience in the photos.
Right. And if the bride needs the water drops edited out, like I can outsource for that. It's not something I'm interested in doing, and there will be a charge for that. It's not my responsibility to make their day go perfectly. I do have a responsibility to keep things on time to the best of my ability and build in buffers. Like, so if that, for example, this weekend we had 50 minutes, 5/10s. And I wanted to shoot in the forest, the stairs, inside the greenhouse, outside the greenhouse, and the gazebo. So I'm like, great, we have 10 minutes per location. And just communicating that to the videographer so we were on the same page. And like, so I do have a responsibility to kind of be aware of things like that. But then once the reception started, like what happens. I did go up to the MC and I'm like, hey, just so you know, we're only here for 20 more minutes. Can we speed things up a little? And then that was on him to make that happen. So like there is a little bit of awareness, but for the most part, just kind of letting go. Same with family shoots, right? Like I have a responsibility to plan the location and the light to the best of my ability. I try to get the Christmas card photo done first because it's like, oh, photographer, we must be a little bit well behaved. Oh, she's really fun. No, we don't need to be. So I try to like set myself up for success, but not holding myself responsible. I've never had a session go so far south that I've had to reschedule it. I've had some dicey ones, but I've always been able, because I'm a bit of not a documentary, but I'm a lifestyle shooter. So they know that that's kind of what they're getting. And I can do head swaps if I need to, for sure. So just letting go of that pressure it takes away, that stress. Now, I say that in my work life. In my home life, I'm like, my child said, what? Have I not raised him well enough? Have we not had enough talks about that? I'm so sorry. Come over here. Why are you doing that? So it's like different. And my children they have very unexpected behaviors.
I understand.
Yeah. My husband took them to the fair the other day, and my child had watched Mark Rober about which fair activities are scams and which ones are legit. And my child just needed to make sure that all the vendors knew that they were running booths that were considered scams. I was like, that is so funny. I'm so glad I wasn't there for that. Because that would have been very stressful for me if I was there. But I think it's hilarious that happened. So like just being able to if I'm not there, I'm like, I can find the enjoyment. And I'm like, can I try to find that enjoyment when I am there? And I'm not great at it in the moment with my own family. But it just takes whether you're neurodiverse or not, it just takes so much pressure off just controlling what you can control and letting the rest go with various degrees. I'm better at doing it when I'm on my meds. I'm much better at being this is outside of my control and that's okay. Off my meds, I'm like, this is outside of my control. It should be okay. I know it's okay. This is an inappropriate amount of emotion that I'm having. I'm going to try really hard not to show this level of emotion.
It's more work, definitely.
It's definitely more work. So and if you're starting out in weddings or that's anxiety inducing, it's not going to feel like that, but it will get there eventually the more that you do it, right?
Well, that's true with all things, right?
Yeah. And I think having kids that have taken away any semblance of control, I mean, I can only be so responsible for what comes out of their mouths, has helped a lot. A lot of the comment I get from a lot of parents is you're so chill. And I'm like, I'm actually really not. It's just that what looks like a hill to you is just a bump to me. So we're not dying on that. I appreciate that that clothing is now wrecked and garbage forever, but nobody's screaming. So I'm just going to throw that in the garbage. And we live in hand-me-downs anyway. We're just going to pull out a new one and move on. This is not worthy of my emotion.
Yes. You pick your battles.
Yeah. Yeah. And I save it for the things I was like, sorry, the teacher on call said what? Did she read the IEP? we need to have a meeting. Like, that's what I'm saving my energy for. The other stuff, I was like, everything in my house is wrecked. I'm just like, to patch the walls one day soon, because I don't know why you thought pushing the couch over while it was on its narrow edge when I asked you to put it back was the best solution. I meant lower it to the ground, but yeah, you can just push it over into the wall too.
But, that's also boys, no matter what
boys, yeah.
Boys, especially when there's more than one, because together they're really scary. Yeah, let's play pirate ship on our couch. And
I know, right? I was like,
take the knives and stab the thing, whatever.
Comes to me and he's like, I'm bleeding. I'm like, what did you do? He's like, I cut myself with the knife while I was cutting the cardboard box. I'm like, well, what knife were you using? He's like, that one. I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. Here, let's bend it, carry on. I did it again. Okay, well, have you considered changing your technique? I mean, it just is what it is. You're not using one of the really sharp knives, so, carry on.
A butter knife wasn't the best choice, but
I mean, yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
A lot of it is just, expectations.
Do you find that you use emotion and play much in your photography?
I feel like I don't as much. It's more activity based, just because my kids don't have moderate emotions. They're 0 to 100. And when they're in 100, the last thing I'm going to, I see these pictures where there's a little teardrop coming down the cheek. I'm like, that's so sweet. We don't experience that over here. So, and I try to be really respectful of when they are dysregulated. So I do try to capture, those moments of joy and whatnot. But I mean, my kids' play is very hyper focused as well. They tend to do sort of the same activities over and over again. So I try to document those different miles. So they loved crafts for the longest time. So I have lots of photos of them, doing crafts. Not as many, but they still just do crafts all the time. A lot of screen time. We're one of those controversial families that we have very modified limits on it. What screen for how long on what day you can do, but there's unlimited Netflix. You know what I mean? It's a very calming activity for my kids. So I know if you were to walk into my house, as crazy as the moments are, it's not a very exciting household. We've usually got all of us on our phones or tablets sitting outside, or we're, all in the pool, which I try to document when, the limited pool season is. But yeah, I wouldn't say to the same levels. There is a series that I've done. I haven't ever posted it as a series, but there's been some really low, hard times with my middle, especially when we didn't know all of his diagnoses or how to treat them or how to approach them. He was very limited verbal up till almost kindergarten. So hard to know what was going on. So there are self-portraits or portraits of him that I've paid him for with candy, where I've been hey, can you come sit in this pocket of light? And they're really solemn photos that kind of represent sort of my emotion around that time. But he's fine. He's not, sad or whatever. He's just sitting there. But he's also he's not a giggly, super crazy, happy kid either in those moments either. So indirectly, it's kind of representing the emotion, but not in the overt ways that I see in a lot of other photographers, where it's in your face joy, or the pensive tear down the cheek, that. It's more subtle what I capture.
Okay, neat. All right, we're going to wrap this episode up, and we're going to come back again, and we're going to talk about creative blockers and a little bit more about your triumphs and your struggles, and we will be back.
Sounds good.
So before you go, share with us a little bit more about how people can learn more about you and what you do.
For sure, yeah. So I have a whole bunch of courses. Some are workshops, which are fully immersive, you and me for a couple of weeks going deep diving. Some are just little quick, minis, download and go. You can read them, on the bus on your way to work. So it's kind of a variety, covering a variety of topics. Obviously, off-camera flash is a big one, taught through a couple workshops. mastering Lightroom, organizing all your hard drives and externals and stuff, as well as editing. That's a big one. And then there's smaller ones like mastering greens, documenting baby's first year, all of those kind of like bite-sized ones. So there's a whole bunch of them, and you guys can find them over at The Framed Focus, which is a photographer educational community and website. And for the link to that, you guys can check out online here.
Awesome. Thank you. If you enjoyed this podcast, The Creative Warriors, the female heart and soul of photography, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep the conversation going. Stay curious and have a happy artistic journey. Thank you for listening to the Creative Warriors podcast, the female heart and soul of photography. See you next episode.